Hello, I'm Kevin Benedict, Senior Analyst for Digital Transformation here at Cognizant, and I want to thank you for joining us today. As our guest speaker today is Rob Tiffany. Rob, thanks for joining us from Microsoft.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So, Rob, what is your formal title nowadays?
So I'm like a worldwide technology lead covering a few areas right now. Enterprise mobility, which actually probably more so than devices is more encompassing a lot of our back-end stuff, like our Intune configuration manager, or a lot of our MAM and MDM stuff, as well as Internet of Things. Our Internet of Things offering is slowly kind of heading down the pathway. We're kind of in a private preview. And so I'm looking after that. You know, we're shepherding that through incubation right now.
Very cool. And is that the new Microsoft Surface I see behind you?
It's kind of like the Surface. It's a little bigger than the one you might see at the store. And it's actually made by Compaq.
I used to sell those. In 1987 and 88, I was working at the NYNEX Business Center in Portland, Oregon.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, so yeah, Compaq luggable. You know, I used to work for Rod Canyon, you know, who started Compaq. I grew up in Houston, and so that I definitely have that connection. That was a great computer company. You know, Compaq was really way ahead of the game.
Yeah, I just wonder, you know, how many middle-aged people are suffering from, you know, lifelong injuries.
Yeah.
Due to carrying that thing around.
Because you really don't get a good workout anymore with laptops and tablets today like you did with a real portable device like this or a luggable. Yeah. You know, no, it's great stuff, and it still works. I can beat up DOS and my big giant floppy disks that our kids would probably have no idea what those are.
That's pretty funny.
It is.
Hey, Rob, let me ask you a question here. Since this is part of the Mobile Expert Interview series, what makes you an expert?
Ah, well, what a loaded question that is. I love it. You know what? I'm not an expert because I went out and bought an iPhone 3GS and started building apps and just became some mobile guy overnight. Probably more of a grinder, probably because I just have so much experience. So it's years, it's experience that makes it that way, not just because I've jumped on the mobile bandwagon. A lot of us mobile people, right, which I think of the older school ones, we actually we came from the wireless business. You know, that's what it was. Before people said, "Are you in the mobile business?" You were actually in the wireless space. Mm-hmm. That all came out of telecom. I don't want anyone to ever forget that all the innovation and all the value you get from phones, none of this would exist if it wasn't for the breakthrough innovations in wireless technologies. All this, we wouldn't be talking about mobile today and smartphones. And so, so when I got out of the Navy, my first job, this was like in '94, was working for a company called Real Time Data, which sounds pretty generic. But back then, you know, I was a wireless software engineer, and we were building embedded stuff to go into vending machines to tell you how much money it's making or how many products it's selling. And we were building our own packets, you know, bit encoded packets, and we were trying to do wireless back then. We were trying to do wireless telemetry back then, kind of very Internet of Things, right?
Yeah, and what's really interesting is that this year at the Mobile World Congress, that's exactly what SAP was showing, a vending machine, a wireless vending machine.
It cracks me up because I see that example used by so many companies of the intelligent vending machine. Well, I don't want to say anything like it took real men to do it back when we did, but anyway, wireless was hard. There was no coverage. We created our own modems. We were bouncing our bit encoded packets off of 450 business radio towers. We didn't have intelligent vending machines like you can buy today. We had the old kind, you know, they're all mechanical, and we built our own black box with our burning our EEPROMs and cabling, and we retrofitted old vending machines to tell us the inventory, to tell us how much money it made, to tell us if someone broke in. Then we put an antenna on top of the vending machines, or if you had a bank of vending machines, which is very common, we built our own LAN, and we did a serial port daisy chain to have just one antenna for like 4 or 5 of them. And
Well, I
so,
want to thank you for both the physical and the emotional scars you must have suffered through.
yes, yes, but it's good. It's good to be hands-on, and so it's also important learning to do things, in the really small world, in the very hard world. So when wireless wasn't prevalent back then, we would have modems. Imagine you're trying to target a city, and it's a pie. Let's just say it's a circle. This wedge of the pie had coverage from this kind of mobile connectivity. This wedge had something else. This wedge maybe had nothing. Do you remember PCs with serial ports? Do you remember something called a digiboard?
I do.
If you needed to get a whole bunch more serial ports hanging off the back of your PC, that's what you did. And you're having to worry about the interrupts and the IRQs and all that back then. So imagine having like 8 different types of modems, some you bought, some you invented, with your own packets bouncing off different wireless technology. Or
okay, time out. I believe you. I believe you. That, my friends, is a mobile expert.
It's old school. And so when people talk about mobile development best practices over the years, so I did that. Then we went in, we were all building Palm Pilot stuff with Code Warrior. And then we did the CE and Pocket PC with embedded C++ and embedded VB, and then .NET Compact Framework. And people would always say, what are the best practices or patterns to follow? And I kind of eschewed a lot of the high-end patterns that you see a lot of architects doing on the desktop and server. I said, you know what, you just got to get right down to the metal on these devices. They're gutless.
That's awesome. Rob, let me switch to the next question here. Your chief executive at Microsoft says that there's 2 things that are the most important things for Microsoft going forward, and that is cloud and mobility. That's pretty big goals there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think what he was doing is he was kind of copying something I said several years ago.
Oh, yeah, I bet. At the bottom, I think it said Rob Tiffany.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. So back in the early days of launching Azure, here I am a mobile developer, but my heart really lives mostly on the back-end stuff, because if you can't deliver the back-end stuff, the client stuff isn't going to matter. And so I remember doing early Azure, back when Azure was just PaaS, and doing REST services to devices. And I always used to say that I really thought that mobile and the cloud was like peanut butter and chocolate. I think they were made for each other. And lots of companies were having trouble figuring out what were those first projects they were going to do on the cloud, because lots of companies were scared of the cloud. They're worried about data security. And it turns out that the best projects were these new greenfield mobile projects, because companies were still kind of trying to dip their toes in the mobile. And so they were a perfect fit. Other elements of why you would need that, why mobile and cloud would go together, mobile devices are going to be anywhere. Typically when we would build stuff on-prem to support mobile devices, you built your server infrastructure and maybe you're reverse proxying out through your DMZ to get out to devices. But if you got, when you start hitting a certain threshold of devices, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, you're talking about a lot of networking and hardware and stuff like that to scale out on-prem. And the cloud makes it so much easier. The things that we used to have to do by hand, the cloud just kind of does it for us. The auto scaling, the caching, all the good stuff that you get from it. And so, absolutely, because today you might build a mobile app, and you might get lucky. It might be popular, and you might have millions of people using your solution. And if your little homegrown backend system isn't up for the challenge, it's going to blow up and you're going to lose all your users. So the cloud is almost essential for those high-scale, high-volume mobile solutions.
It is so interesting to me how the complexity is being abstracted away from the mobile apps today. But at the same time, we can't forget the back end. And matter of fact, I'll be bringing some, sharing some survey data up here toward the end of our discussion today that really emphasizes that point.
Absolutely.
Now, let me ask you just a couple questions here. Microsoft is kind of late to the game around the enterprise mobility space. Talk to me about what are some of the challenges that are out there for Microsoft in the enterprise mobility space, and what's Microsoft doing to overcome those challenges?
Absolutely. Well, we're actually early to the space as usual, and then late. So, we actually were the first to the space, or one of the earliest ones. But you're right, we've kind of been wandering around for a while. So there's the element of enterprise mobility, obviously from the device side of things, spanning to the server side of things and management and things like that. And so what are we doing about it? I'll start off with the device side. So you probably know we have this new Windows Phone 8.1. As you can see here, wait for it. Oh, look at that. It's notifications. It's an action center. Anyway, not that that helps the enterprise, but that's one of the things people needed. So, and when I travel around the world talking to CIOs and trying to find out what they want in a mobile device, it's been really refreshing to me to hear them asking for Windows Phone 8.1. They're all wondering, when can I get it? I know this may not sound like a big deal to you, but it's great to have CIOs saying, we want that device. You know how we've had this big mega trend of BYOD? Well, you may have noticed in some of the statistics, some of the numbers, there's a counterintuitive trend going the other direction. It's small, but it's there, and it's actually going backwards to corporate liable. I'm not saying it's the biggest part, it's the smallest part of the trend, but there's some companies that are kind of going, you know, maybe we're going to pull this back. So I'll give you a good example. I don't want to beat up on BlackBerry because they make great devices, but you know, we've seen some companies that are, you know, wondering what they should do about that. And in some of those cases, they've been saying, you know what, Windows Phone 8.1 has the security, the manageability, the VPN, all the stuff we need, and it also has the low cost. And these things can kind of go together to make it a great scenario for corporate liable kind of a resurgence for big global customers. So, for instance, analysts have long said, hey, you know, Windows Phone sure runs great on low-end hardware. You don't have to throw tons of cores at it to make it run great. So we've got this device called the Lumia 520 that you can go buy at Target or Walmart for 60, 70, 80 bucks. Well, imagine the rest of the world where they don't live in the America la-la land of subsidized plans. They have to actually pay for the cost of the phone. Imagine that we've got a device that runs on low-end hardware but runs amazingly well. It has all the security and manageability features that a CIO needs. You all of a sudden have an economic way of going forward where a company can say, wow, you know what? I'm gonna equip my 20,000 employees with low-end Windows Phone devices because you know, it's like a match made in heaven. You know, we've got our BitLocker security. We've got our, you know, our enterprise enrollment where you enroll the device and all of a sudden, you know, certs start coming down and configures your VPN, all that fun stuff.
Hey, Rob, let me interrupt you here for a moment. And you guys also have a mobile application and a mobile device management environment as well.
Absolutely.
What's the name of that?
So we have something called Intune. Quickly, our EMM stack that we have here, you know, so all the MDM stuff is taken care of by Intune that runs in the cloud. For customers who already have System Center Configuration Manager, they can connect to each other through a back channel because there's lots of folks who use System Center Config Man and they're comfortable there, and so they can continue using that if they want. There's some people, though, that love just the ease of cloud only, and so they can do all their MDM. They can, you know, so you know, the provisioning VPN, provisioning certs, provisioning Wi-Fi, things like that. You know, all the settings that you would do, the security. And the other cool stuff we got is we got some new things coming along in the MAM space, actually, around that, which I find are really interesting. We're going to start doing...
What's that acronym stand for in your world?
Mobile Application Management.
Okay.
So beyond just the basics of, hey, I need to push software apps out to my devices and inventory them and uninstall them and update that. That's kind of your baseline, what you would expect. We've always had that. But lots of other people are doing, you know, wanting to do things like app wrapping and containerizing and restricting data. Because a big problem is data leakage. You know, a lot of times people think of the device as your weak link there. So one of the things that we're working on and we'll be coming out with later on, we're shooting for the end of the calendar year, is some new updates to Intune. They're actually going to work with Office. Wow. Office on the iPad and Android specifically, you know, where we're going to put a wrapper container around Office. You know, people talk about app wrapping in the abstract all the time as this great idea because we put policies right on the apps, either via an SDK and changing the code or putting wrapping that doesn't need it. Oftentimes, though, the talk doesn't match the reality. You know, because I hear people all the time saying, hey, how can I get source code from this ISV to change their code so it can work in my container or my, you know, MAM solution? So we're going to make it real with the world's most popular apps being Office, and we're going to do that for them. And we're going to create this secure garden, if you will.
No, that's awesome. So
yeah,
you had SAP jumping in early with a bunch of acquisitions and announcements around enterprise mobility. This year, Oracle's been coming on pretty strong. They acquired, they launched their own full suite of enterprise tools. Plus, they announced last week their acquisition of TOA Technology for field services, which has a very robust mobile environment for service techs. So you see a lot, you see your competition moving in that space. Sounds like you guys have a lot of enterprise mobility kinds of tools out there that people may not know the full scale of.
Absolutely. To finish with management, lots of times analysts and people don't even know, because a lot of our functionality that might compete with other people like AirWatch or Mobile Iron are actually already baked into our servers, and it's not a separate box you got to stand up. When it comes to developing stuff for the field, stuff for apps, well, gosh, Visual Studio is still the #1 development tool on the planet by a wide margin. And I know lots of people have built their own IDEs, and we've seen all the MEP stuff, and now we're seeing a lot of mobile backend as a service stuff happening. One of the things you've seen probably when you talk about Satya talking about the changes we've made is really kind of the reality check, embracing all these other platforms. We want to bring productivity to our platforms and other platforms. And so some of the changes you've seen, in Visual Studio, for instance, going to this universal app, which initially is just helping phone and tablets with the same app, but our partnership with Xamarin, all those mono tools that you remember, Miguel de Casa. So bringing in the .NET and C# from the Xamarin tools to leverage this massive community of .NET developers we have to let them build apps for iOS and Android in the same IDE in Visual Studio as their Windows and Windows Phone apps. And so I think that's going to be huge, especially when you tie it into having all the flexibility of a backend like Azure to let them build the biggest, most scalable mobile solutions possible. One other thing I'll drill into is, speaking of MBAS, this mobile backend as a service thing, we've got something like that too, and it's built in Azure. It's called Azure Mobile Services.
Okay.
And we've done some things recently. We've added some data sync stuff, which I know you'll know all about it, because we used to all do that SQL CE replication stuff with Windows Mobile. So imagine, because I have customers asking me every week, hey, Rob, what's the replacement for all that sync stuff we used to build on rugged Windows Mobile? Well, here's the answer. It's going to be SQLite. We know SQLite is the most popular embedded database on the planet. It runs everywhere. It's a wide open license. It's public domain. You don't have to do anything. It comes baked into iOS and Android, and we've got it working on Windows Phone and Windows, so it's everywhere. So what our folks in Azure Mobile Services did is, like a normal MBAS, they're trying to make hard things easy, making authentication just mindlessly easy, making push notifications to all devices super easy. So we added sync. So we've got some wrappers that are going to go around SQLite that'll deliver change tracking to SQLite on the devices. We have data sync. So instead of you building hundreds or whatever of web services, REST services for your data movement between the cloud, you just use the sync technology that we give you that, because our customers are always saying, hey, we don't have ubiquitous wireless. How do our employees keep working when they're offline? And we've always had SQL CE in the past to do that. So now we're going to have SQLite. You'll be able to sync from either, you can talk today, it'll be SQL Azure. It could be Azure Table Storage, which is kind of our NoSQL. We also work with MongoDB. We also have the ability to go right through the cloud and back down on-prem to connect directly to your real SQL servers. So we'll have that data sync that's just automatic for you. You'll download the data, you'll keep working, it does change tracking, and then you push the changes back up at the end of the day or whenever you want to, and it just pushes the changes. It also does versioning and conflict resolution.
So what's that solution called? If somebody wants to call their wrapper, look online, what's the word they should use?
Azure Mobile Services.
Azure Mobile Services, excellent. Now you have, Microsoft has had some recent announcements around Windows Phone 8.1. Talk to us about what we would expect out of there that would help an enterprise.
Absolutely. Well, I know we always like to talk about Cortana, but actually you're going to actually be able to use that for enterprise stuff. But the big thing is, so we start out with device encryption. Obviously, we have BitLocker. We used to not encrypt the SD card though, but what we do now is, and there's a reason behind that. Most people put videos and pictures and media on their SD cards, and if you encrypt it, it slows down your ability to read and write. So to meet halfway, we're now allowing apps to be on the SD card, and so on those blocks, those parts of the SD card where the apps are, we encrypt just that area where the apps, so that they're totally secure with the AES encryption. Then this notion of enterprise enrollment, and I'm not just talking about Intune or MDM enrollment, but literally just when you have that new employee, be able to push down everything the device needs, connection to SharePoint, whatever, to get them going. We now support doing cert-based auth on the device. We didn't always used to do that. And so client certs, things like that, we can push those out. Certs can be used for Wi-Fi, for VPN, for cert-based auth for your apps. Lots of companies choose not to have their employees put in usernames and passwords. They do everything by certs. So we'll support that from apps. We'll support it from the browser, from IE. Enterprise Wi-Fi, so that kind of just goes back to cert-based Wi-Fi as opposed to always putting in some kind of password. Auto-triggered, app-triggered VPN based on DNS. And so being able to have that automatic triggering VPN tunnel whenever a particular app needs to connect to CorpNet, if you don't have a reverse proxy kind of scenario set up. And each one of those apps actually get their own individual tunnel, so it's not just a shared VPN tunnel. SMIME, this is an encryption technology for email, very popular in government. When you talk about people who have been using the BlackBerry and they want to look for their options, they're often requiring SMIME email encryption. I would say the entire country of Germany has demanded SMIME, and so we are absolutely delivering that. Blacklisting, whitelisting of apps on the device, so that some apps need to be forced down for everybody, and some you can't use at all. I think that's kind of a common idea. And then just real simple ability for the device to enroll in not only Intune but other EMM packages. So it's ready for the enterprise big time, in a big way. In a way we haven't been since the Windows Mobile days, actually.
Oh, that's exciting, and congratulations on all the progress you guys have made there.
Absolutely.
Over the last several weeks, I've been running a survey, Rob, asking mobile experts out there to participate in a survey. And let me just read you one of the questions. Are your or your clients' mobile strategies and plans inhibited or limited because of your current IT environment? Here's the answer. 77.7% said yes, their plans and strategies are inhibited by their current IT environment. Does that in any way surprise you, Rob?
It doesn't surprise me. It might surprise some CIOs who think they've got their act together. Kind of like we've talked about. Mobile's a game changer. In the past, lots of companies would build, groupware, stuff for work groups, stuff for a few hundred people or a few thousand or even tens of thousands. They've never seen the number of endpoints connecting to anything in their lives like they've seen now with all these mobile devices. It's overwhelming. And so those back-end systems that maybe were good enough for their LAN-based applications are just not going to cut it on so many levels, actually. Whether it's security, whether it's scalability, whether it's performance, because you're not always just building solutions for your employees that need to work offline and occasionally connected. You are oftentimes building B2C apps for customers or prospective customers. And those apps sometimes aren't just some marketing app that just sits on a device and doesn't do anything. Sometimes they're going to be sending responses back to your servers. All of a sudden, you've just kind of creeped into enterprise territory, and God help you if 10 million people are using your app and your IT infrastructure isn't up to snuff, which is probably not.
Absolutely, and I don't think I've ever been in an environment that was all unified or on the same exact vendor's environment. So it's not just all an Oracle shop or all Microsoft or all SAP. Oftentimes you'll see a mixture of those, the ages, the legacy systems, there's mainframes around and all that. Here's another question. Will your IT environment prevent you from delivering an optimized mobile app experience? 43.2% said yes, their environment will prevent them from delivering an optimized mobile environment. And I think by optimized, often we're talking about real time today. People don't want to wait for answers when they're standing there with a mobile phone in their hand looking for information.
Absolutely.
You know, how do you deal with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, you either have great architects who know how to build this stuff, or you can start moving some of your stuff to the cloud and let the cloud take on all that extra workload for you. And I don't just mean things like Azure, just nuts and bolts things. Let's just talk about Exchange Server. Let's talk about one of the deficiencies in IT right now, and it's around networking and Wi-Fi. With people carrying more and more wireless devices, the wireless access points that you see in the roof, the ceilings of all the floors of all these skyscrapers are wholly insufficient to handle the load. And so one of the things people have to do is increase the density of those APs, right? And then other geeky stuff like DHCP lease times and expirations. All that has to change because you got all these mobile devices coming on and off the network really fast. Things aren't stable anymore, like when we used to just have our chained to our desktop, right, over Ethernet. And so you can't give an optimized experience unless you've started doing some of those things, the higher speed Wi-Fi, the increased density, and on and on and on. And
we haven't even added to the mix the Internet of Things in this discussion.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Good luck with that. Yeah. We're going to go from millions and billions to probably trillions, you know.
So Rod, you see us kind of getting ahead of ourselves with mobile devices and the Internet of Things, and we're going to come to a point where we're going to have to stop and look backwards and say, I guess I'm going to have to fix everything behind me if I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy. The Internet of Things are going to stress the Internet and networks of all shapes and sizes like they've never been stressed before. And I know we like to drill into things about apps or whatever, but basic infrastructure is going to be stressed. And also, we're going to have to find new and innovative ways to provide massive levels of security to all these things. You know, one of the things we don't always talk about is there's an onslaught happening to companies everywhere by independent actors and state actors who are hacking into companies all the time. I talk to these CSOs all the time, and they talk about how they're just under constant attack every day.
Wow.
Trying to get in, trying to penetrate, and not that I'm not going to say this is anything new because people get hacked all the time, but let's talk about the Internet of Things. If the network, let's talk about those IT networks that are not ready, like your survey said. Some people will build these flat networks, and once you break, if the hacker manages to get through your firewall and your DMZ, and they get in and they see your servers and they get at your data, and that's really bad, and they're stealing your IP to copy it or whatever. What's really bad, though, is we've got other customers, other companies here. We're not all just information companies. Some companies are running, you know, power plants or nuclear plants or power lines or the grid. And sometimes if those networks to get to those, I don't know if you're familiar, like things like SCADA, which is kind of part of the M2M Internet of Things, you know, basically controlling. I need to control valves on a power plant or turn switches on and off remotely. If hackers can get to those things, we are in serious trouble. You know, stealing data is bad enough, being able to attack the grid. And so this Internet of Things thing is a potential Pandora's box around that. And so we absolutely have to just be hardcore on our security when it comes to that stuff.
Absolutely. You brought up the term stressed, and that begs the question, do you have children?
Yes.
And have they
you're basically saying I must be really
cause...
stressed because I have children, right?
Yes.
Of course I am.
So you have children and you're stressed. Have they ever stressed your home network?
Every day. You know, so... You know, you got all these Xboxes. Let's see.
Obviously, of course.
Yeah, you know, of course. the kids, so playing online games, connected that way. Let's see, everybody's got laptops, smartphones, some tablets. And so just like an enterprise that has too many people connecting to an access point, sometimes our homes are a microcosm of that same phenomenon. And so sometimes we have too many kids connecting with too many devices, moving too much data, all at the same time. And then I hear complaints,
So, Rob, how many wireless devices would you guess you have in your home?
I'm going to guess, let's see, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I don't know, maybe 20. I don't know. 15 or 20, something like that,
That's awesome. Rob, I want to thank you so much for sharing your insight and experience with all of us today.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. It's always good to chat with you.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.